on the channel, it's the return of the Kyle Peterson Top 10, and today on the channel, we're counting down my top 10 Goldust figures of all time.
The spirit of Olympian Warrior will run forever!
Kyle here, and welcome back to the channel for another edition of the Kyle Peterson Top 10. As every Thursday here on the channel, we're counting down my top 5, and like today, my top 10 favorites of something. And today, old Dustin Rhodes, Goldust himself, drew the short straw, and we're counting down our top 10 favorite Goldust figures of all time. As usual, this is my list. Make sure you put your list in the comments down below, and make sure you put them in order. That is the hard part, but that is also the fun part of these lists. And Goldust, no stranger to figures. We've had a lot of different variations over the years, and this is just Goldust figures we're talking here. We're not talking Dustin Rhodes figures, his old Galoob, things like that. And Dustin Rhodes, a guy that's wrestled technically, I guess, in 5 different decades, starting at the very end of the 80s and now here in the early 2020s. He's wrestled in 5 different decades. There's not a lot of wrestlers that can say that. The Lou Theszes of the world, I know, is, I think, part of that team. But very interesting, long career for old Dustin, and some say he's still got it. And we hear it all the time on AEW, still a top performer. I think he's getting towards the end, of course. I think he's probably got a year left, maybe something like that. Big part of AEW behind the scenes, and he does run a training camp as well. So Goldust, the Rhodes legacy lives on through Dustin and, of course, Cody after that. And we'll see what happens after that. You never know. But Goldust, an interesting one, and it's so funny. I still remember the first time I saw Goldust, and it was one of those moments, you know, pre-having internet. You're just a young kid. I don't know how old I was. I was early teenager, maybe even a little less than that, probably early teenager. But I remember seeing Goldust on TV. I was like, gosh, I know this guy. Who is this? And for some reason, my head just did not compute. And I go all the way back to when Dustin came out with Dusty in the WWF way back in the day against Virgil and Ted DiBiase. We remember that feud. And then, of course, him jumping over to WCW, being a big part of WCW, him tagging with Barry Windham, one of my favorites from that era. I loved their tag team, The Natural. I loved it. I loved that jacket he used to wear with like the pool ball on the back. I always thought that was the coolest jacket ever. So I was a big fan of him in WCW. A lot of good matches back in the day in WCW. And then in, what was it, 95, let's say, he went to the WWF as Goldust. And going back full circle to the story, I remember seeing him, I was like, gosh, this guy is so familiar, but I cannot figure out who it is. And it took me like a weekend. I think I first saw him on Superstars or whatever it was. And I remember just thinking all weekend, like, gosh, I know who this is. Why? This is so weird. There's like a disconnect. And then it finally clicked at me when I was in school on Monday. And I remember telling my friends, like, I just can't believe this. And most of my friends said, what's WCW exactly? It was before the Monday Night Wars. Not a lot of people watched both wrestling, if wrestling at all. But I remember just being, I couldn't believe that Dustin Rhodes had turned into Goldust and this whole character and all this. It was just such a shocker to young Kyle's mind, and it's a shocker all these years later. Who knows? But a very interesting character, a Hall of Famer, no doubt, is Goldust. Dustin Rhodes, one of the greatest performers of all time, keeping up his parents' legacy, or I should say his dad, Dusty's legacy, just like Cody Rhodes is doing right now. So without further ado, let's kick it off. Let's start it off at number 10. We begin the countdown at number 10, like a lot of good countdowns do, and number 10 comes to us from one of the most innovative lines of all time in some ways, and a line that we really needed at the time. And what are we talking about? We're talking about Jax. We're talking about the Bone Cruncher line. We're talking about Too Tough Series 1 Goldust. Of course, this is a 2-pack. Him and Marlena, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this Marlena later in this video, so stay tuned to that. But love Goldust Bone Cruncher figure. Series 1, of course, was the first one, but this 2-pack with Marlena was pretty cool. A different look to the outfit, a little bit changes than the first Series 1 we had here, but getting this Marlena, even though it's more of a statue than a figure, was such a game changer back in the old playing days. Very cool, and I still, to this day, when I think of playability-wise for my wrestling figures, a lot of people are going to say Mattel Jazzwares right now. Those are the greatest playability, but to me, the Bone Crunchers are what I wanted. It had a little feel of that LJN, a little bit of the sizing of the Hasbro, but movable joints, and you could have good matches, and you felt like you weren't going to break the figures for the most part. So I always do say the greatest playing figures of all time, at least for me, were Bone Crunchers. I know that one's all over the place. Maybe we'll do a top 5 video one day on the channel. The top 5 playability-wise wrestling figures of all time. But a very cool 2-pack from the early Jakks BCA days. Very underappreciated, I do feel, after all these years. And, you know, time, things get forgotten and stuff. And that's part of the beauty of this channel, bringing back some memories of the past. So I do love this one. Love what it's about. That's why it's coming in at number 10. Feeling fine at number 9 as the countdown marches on, and this time we go back to Jakks. We go to Deluxe Aggression Series 21 for a little Goldust. And once again, I talked about the Bone Crunchers being underrated. The Deluxe Aggression figures may be the most underrated figures of all time. There's a lot of people that dismiss them, a lot of people that hate them, but they truly are the link between Jakks Ruthless Aggression and the Mattel Elite style. This was right in the middle. This was the evolution of figures, and we saw Mattel take a lot of this, but change it. They shrunk it down a little bit, didn't have such overly muscular figures, I guess you would call it, but they tweaked this idea, this plan here, to make the Mattel Elites we know and love to this day. So this is part of the evolution of figures, and one a lot of people forget about. They always think of the Ruthless Aggression straight into Mattel. They forget the Deluxe Aggression, and the Deluxe Aggression has some sleeper figures, some really good figures in that line. We saw TNA and Jakks go over. Once they lost the line, they went to the TNA brand and made some of these figures as well that fit right in the same scale, which was really cool as well. But this Goldust, a little bit plain Jane for a Goldust figure, especially in the Deluxe Aggression line, but there's just something cool about this. Of course, the articulation at the time, way ahead of the time, but a good look of Goldust at this time. Not the classic early Goldust, kind of the middle of the road era of Goldust. Just very, very good looking paint applications and a beautiful head. Jakks had some of the best head sculpts in the game still to this day. A lot of the heads hold up after all these years. So I really, really do like this one. I really do like the Deluxe Aggression line. So coming in at number 9 is Series 21 Goldust. Now we're feeling great at number 8. How many puns can we get out there? I think that's it, but we'll see what we can do here. But number 8, once again, we go to Jakks, and I was just talking about it. Now we're going to the Ruthless Aggression line, and once again, I'm a champion of this line. I loved it at the time. I love it now. Yes, a lot of people hate them. I get it, but that's like every single toy line. There's people out there, believe it or not, that hate Mattel and Jazzwares figures. So you like what you like, you don't what you don't, but I do definitely have a soft spot in my heart, oh, my deep heart, for the Jakks Ruthless Aggression line. So much so, Ruthless Aggression Series 41, yes, Series 41 Goldust makes my list, and a lot like that Deluxe Aggression. Not the classic early version of Goldust, but kind of a middle-of-the-road career of Goldust here, but a very, very cool one, a very striking one. I haven't mentioned it yet, but of course, face paint. I'm a sucker for face paint, a sucker for the looks on this one, and the gold and black attack looks really, really sharp in this figure. And we had a lot of good Jakks Ruthless Aggressions, but my favorite one, I believe, is going to be this one, and that is Series 41, coming in at number 8 in our top 10 countdown. Next up in the countdown, we're at the number 7 spot, and this time we head on over to Mattel. We dance our way over to the Mattel offices, and we come out with a Goldust figure, but which one? Well, we go to the retro line for Goldust. Now, Goldust missed the mark maybe by a couple of years to be in the traditional Hasbro line, but it was cool to get a more classic style of the Hasbro era in Hasbro style in the Mattel retro line, and that's what we got here with this Goldust. Of course, the hair is removable, the wig. We saw this in many lines, Mattel, Jakks, of course, but very, very cool that you can remove that. But this is a classic version of Goldust, where some of the ones we just talked about were more of a later on version of Goldust. This is the classic interpretation of the debuting time frame of Goldust, and very fitting, very cool to get him in the retro line. And if for the classic guys they could do at the time that were back there in that time of beginnings of the new gen era into the Attitude era, things like that, Goldust seemed to be a perfect fit for the Mattel retro set. Very cool, definitely pops out on the shelf. Something different than the rest of the figures here, and one that I just can't take my eye off, and that's why he's coming in at number 7. All right, we've hit the number 6 spot of our countdown here. And number 6, we go to the Mattel Elite line for the first time here. We're going to Mattel Elite Series 29 for Goldust, and this is kind of a later version of Goldust. I think this is about when he started teaming with Cody, maybe a little bit. They were probably crossing over around this time, but as we saw with a lot of them, removable wig, always love that. Love the hair on the back, how it's not painted, which he didn't always do, and then the front is painted, but a very, very good representation. Once again, it's not the classic Goldust, but I always think of this as the work rate Goldust. Goldust put on some amazing matches during this time frame of his career. You know, the early era, it was more about the show with Goldust. Then he morphed into the same character with some tweaks. Obviously, the Attitude Era, we're not even going to talk about some of that stuff. That was pretty off the rails. But then he came back for another run, and it was quite the run out there, having a lot better matches maybe than he was allowed to in years past. And that's kind of what this one represents to me here. And it is the first Mattel representation on this very countdown. So coming in at number 6, Mattel Elite Series 29. All right, we're at the halfway point in our countdown. You got your list together. Make sure you put it in the comments down below. And of course, you made it this far. You're halfway through. You might as well like the video. Get it over with. You got to do it sometime, right? Give the old Hacksaw Jim Duggan thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe while you're at it here on the channel. But number 5, once again, we go back to Mattel. We go a few series more. We go to Elite Series 36 for another version of Goldust. A nice plastic robe on this Goldust. Once again, not too different than the last one. I just prefer this one just a hair more, and I think the robe is what does it. I'm a sucker for spikes like a young LOD Road Warriors. Angry face on Goldust right here, looking really good. And this, I think, was about the time when he was partnering with his brother. That last one might not have been quite there yet, but I think this is where it kind of began. I could totally be wrong and off on that, but a very, very good representation. Full bodysuit Goldust. Just very, very cool one here, and that's why it comes in at number 5. We've hit the number 4 spot in our countdown. And number 4, we go to Goldust from the Elite line once again, the Mattel Elite line, and we go to Elite Series 6 Goldust. Now, this is really a transitional period for Goldust, where he went from the craziness, then to the attitude craziness, then to more of the, yes, it's Goldust, but a little bit more classy. I don't know. I'm making up words at this point, but he's got a delicate, nice robe, looking really, really good. This is a very, like, Ric Flair type robe on Goldust. He was changing it up, got the big cheesy smile going on, of course. Wig is going to be removable as well. Just a very cool one, and one of the more sharper Mattel looking figures we got over the year. Of course, we did get a lot of basics, Championship Showdown, I guess they were battle packs back then, but you got elites, you got battle packs, you got basics. We got quite a few Goldusts over the years, and this one always did stick out, and I think the robe is what really brings this one home. Of course, face paint helps, and the wig helps as well, but a very, very good looking representation of Goldust. So good, in fact, it landed at number 4 to Mattel Elite number 6. Closer and closer to the end in our top 10 Goldust countdown. We're at the final 3, and at number 3, we once again go to Jakks, and we go to truly a game changer line. I referenced it earlier, but this time we're going to Bone Crunchers Series 1 Goldust, and it was such a big deal when these figures came to market. Of course, I was playing with my LJNs, I morphed into playing with my Hasbros, and then like a Mack truck, it hit us. No more figures. Of course, the green cards never came to my area, didn't even know they existed. Then the Bendums came out, the old Just Toy Bendums, and I said, I just can't do this. These Bendums just aren't me. To me, they aren't truly action figures. We've discussed that a lot on the channel, but there is a Goldust Bendum. If you want to count that in your list, you're more than welcome to count it. But it was a dormant, dark day, and that's where my X-Men collecting kind of ramped up a little bit because I didn't have the wrestling to buy. But then, all of a sudden, one faithful day, I strolled into my Toys R Us. It was a Friday, like a Friday should be. Strolling into Toys R Us with my dad. He was hitting the lineups. We hit those first because they were in the front of the store. Then we'd meander our way to the back and see what was going on, see what all the fuss was about on a Friday night before we got some pizza. But what did I see one day? I walked in and I saw the Superstars, the Jakks Series 1. Of course, this is pre-internet. We had no idea this was coming out, or at least I didn't. So I about fell down and had a heart attack and a stroke at the same time at a young teenage age. Had a stroke right there in the aisle, but I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Luckily, I picked up every single one of those that night. My dad knew the importance. We had to get these, and that's what we did. So I was very excited, and these to me, hey, it's like the size of a Hasbro almost, a little taller, of course, but the feel kind of an LJN, but you got articulation on them. It was really everything you wanted as a toy player, somebody that was playing with their figures as a little kid. It truly blended all the styles into the next generation. It's very easy to dismiss figures like this after all these years. Oh, it's a dog toy, it doesn't have anything special to it. But at the time, it was truly revolutionary, truly groundbreaking, and for somebody like me that loved their wrestling figures, was a welcome addition to a new wrestling toy line. Yes, this line did descent into absolute madness with resets, variants, paint changes, crazy series, same figure in different packages. It got absolutely crazy, but this was truly a kid's toy, not a collector's thing. There's some collectability to it after all these these years, but totally a different set of circumstances, a total different time, but a very one I do fondly remember back on. It's just a very cool time to be a wrestling fan of action figures, I guess we'll call it with that. But this one from Series 1 kicked off a whole new generation of wrestling figures and was very cool and very groundbreaking for the time. So a lot of good memories with this one. No doubt it was going to be on my list, and it landed here at number 3. Dangerously close to the finish line as we're at the number 2 spot, and number 2 in our Goldust countdown. Once again, we go back to the Mattel Elite line. We go to Series 47, 47B, that is. Oh yes, 47B for Goldust. Now this is the Goldust you think of, or at least I do when I close my eyes and I put my head on the pillow and I say, what's Goldust look like? This is kind of what I think of first, and then I go down to the other incarnations, the other looks. But this Goldust, absolutely awesome. Of course, you could have him squaring off with Roddy Piper, any of the guys of his classic feuds of his original run. And I did mention earlier, we're going to see Marlena again. We're going to see her right now. This is a little pro tip out there. This is a very cheap Marlena figure. You can get this for just, $5-10 bucks, probably shipped on eBay if you wanted to. This pairs perfectly with this version of Elite Goldust. Just absolutely perfect. I have this with my Elites. Just looks spot on next to him. So pro tip, you want to dress up your Goldust figure, pick up one of these. But just, it is Goldust. This is what you think of with Goldust. This is the Mattel Elite representation of this version of Goldust. Who knows, once his career's over, I wouldn't be shocked for him to sign a Legends deal with WWE, go into the Hall of Fame, get some more Mattel figures. How about an Ultimate Edition Goldust? There's a lot of cool Goldusts we could get from the Elite line one day. But this one still, to me, holds up pretty good. It's got his classic jumpsuit on underneath. Of course, the classic robe. Just a very, very solid version of Goldust. And still one of the best Goldust figures of all time. As you can tell, it's number 2 on my list. And I got to think it's on a lot of your lists as well. So coming in at number 2, Elite 47B, Goldust. All right, the time is up. The time is now. We are at the number 1 Goldust figure of all time. Do you got your list together? Put it in the comments down below. And like I said earlier, make sure you like and subscribe to this very YouTube channel. We got videos every single day, but we got a countdown video every single Thursday, very similar to this one. But let's dive into it here. Coming in at number 1 comes from quite possibly my favorite wrestling figure line of all time. It's one I have a deep, deep connection to, a lot of good stories about, and you guys have seen those videos every single Tuesday for about 3 years here on the channel, as we've talked everything and anything Jack's Classic Superstars, and we've talked about this one a time or two along the way. It is the Ringside Collectible exclusive Goldust. Now this is a fancy one. Obviously, Ringside Collectible exclusive. Use discount code Kyle, save yourself 10%. Love the Ringside Collectible exclusives, but this Goldust taken it to another level. Of course, soft goods robe on this one. The only time we've ever got in action figure form this version of the Intercontinental title with the classic gold color around it, the gold band. Just very cool. You got the Shattered Dreams exclusive sticker right there, and then you get the gold on the packaging. It feels like a classic Superstar, but you got some different coloring. Instead of the black, you got the gold. Just very, very cool looking figure. I do have a loose one, of course. You guys know I would. You got a loose version of him as well. You got the removable wig, as we're accustomed to. Like I said, the soft goods, the Intercontinental belt. Just an absolute ton to like about this one, and especially when this came out all those years ago. Was it 2005 maybe? 2009, I'm way off. Came out in 2009. Definitely a game changer then, a game changer now, and still my favorite Goldust figure of all time. All these years later, some 14 years later, still the gold standard, no pun intended, if you ask me. So there it is, number 1, Jack's Classic Superstars, Ringside Collectibles, Shattered Dreams, exclusive Goldust is my number 1 Goldust figure of all time. But like I said, make sure you get your list in the comments down below. Sound off down below on your favorite Goldust figures. And then, of course, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like this video. Check out the Patreon for early access to videos like this. Bonus content, exclusive content, giveaways, Q&As, a lot going on over the Patreon channel. And, of course, it supports this channel and all the content. You can also support the channel at ProWrestlingTees.com. Search Kyle Peterson. And don't forget social media. SirPaul64 on Twitter, Instagram, _Kyle_Peterson. So for Goldust, I'm Kyle. See you guys all real soon.